Far beyond the glowing arms of the Milky Way lies a planet untouched by war. Its name is Valora, a world where the sky sings in two colors and the oceans breathe with light. For generations, its people lived in harmony with their world, unaware of the turmoil among the stars. But that peace ended one silent night when a burning object tore through their sky and crashed into the Valley of Crystal Trees. When the smoke cleared, the Valorans gathered at the impact site. They had never seen such a craft. Metallic, scorched, bleeding smoke into the air. Inside, beneath the twisted hull, lay a being unlike any they had ever known. Its body was broken, its armor fractured, its breath faint but steady. A human. They did not understand his words, but the plea in his voice transcended all language. He was calling for help. The Valorans were not warriors or conquerors. They were healers. With trembling hands, they lifted the wounded man and carried him to their sanctuary. Their medicine was unlike his science, alive, organic, pulsing with energy. They placed him under the glow of their twin moons, letting the vines and crystals weave their light into his wounds. Through the long night they worked, and by dawn the stranger still breathed. For the first time in Valoran history, they had saved a creature from the stars. When he awoke, confusion filled his eyes. The beings surrounding him glowed faintly, their voices melodic, their gestures calm. Slowly, through patient communication, the barrier of language began to fade. His name was Captain Elias Ward, a soldier of Earth's Frontier Corps. He had been caught in an ambush while on patrol, his ship damaged beyond recovery. He spoke of home, of humanity, of endless skies filled with both wonder and war. The Valorans listened with disbelief. They had no concept of war, no word for destruction on such scale. They could not imagine fire raining from the heavens or worlds consumed for resources. Yet in Elias's broken voice they heard truth. The universe, vast and beautiful, also carried shadows. And so, despite their fear, they vowed to protect this lone traveler who had fallen into their care. As his strength returned, Elias grew close to the people of Valora. He taught their children about the stars, about bravery, about Earth, a world of oceans and forests and cities that touched the clouds. In return, they taught him silence, patience, and the harmony of living in rhythm with one's world. Two civilizations, light years apart, found something neither had known before: connection. One evening, as the wind sang across the plains, Elias activated a small beacon from the wreckage of his ship. It pulsed softly, a faint blue signal beating into the void. It was a call for rescue, a whisper to Earth across the darkness. The Valorans watched in wonder, thinking it a symbol of friendship. They didn't understand that such a signal could summon far more than a rescue. Weeks passed, and then one dawn the sky lit with fire once more. Streaks of light descended through the clouds, vast shadows gliding across the sea. The Valorans gathered on the cliffs, staring in awe as enormous vessels emerged from the heavens. These were not meteors. They were ships, human ships. An entire armada had come, steel and plasma reflecting the morning sun. The ground shook as the flagship descended. A voice echoed from above, strong and clear. "Captain Elias Ward, this is Earth Command. We have found you." Elias raised his eyes in disbelief. The insignia of Earth shimmered across the sky. He told them how the Valorans had saved him, sheltered him, treated him with compassion no soldier could repay. There was silence from the fleet's commander. Then came the decree. This world Valora was now under Earth's protection. The Valorans did not fully understand what that meant, but Elias did. Above their skies, Earth's warships formed a shimmering barrier of defense. Humanity had come not to conquer, but to guard. Yet deep inside, Elias wondered if his distress call had brought salvation or danger. For somewhere out there in the unseen dark, something was watching, something that now knew where to find them. In the days that followed, the skies of Valora changed forever. The gentle blue hue of dawn was now streaked with the silhouettes of orbiting vessels. Earth's armada had positioned itself like a shimmering crown above the planet, its presence both magnificent and intimidating. To the Valorans, it was unlike anything they had ever seen, an entire fleet of thunder and light, watching silently from the heavens. To Elias, it was a sight both comforting and haunting. Humanity had answered his call, but the cost of that signal had yet to be revealed. The Valorans tried to welcome their new protectors, offering songs and crystals, gifts of gratitude that pulsed softly with natural energy. But the humans, bound by protocol and caution, did not descend. They observed, they scanned, they measured every energy fluctuation on the surface. The commanders aboard the flagship had seen something in the data, something they couldn't explain. There was movement, far beyond the system's edge, patterns that hinted at life, but not the kind anyone wanted to meet. Elias walked among his new family on the planet's surface, torn between two worlds. He could hear the distant hum of Earth's ships in the upper atmosphere, a reminder of his duty, of orders, of command. Yet when he looked into the eyes of the Valorans, he saw a people untouched by the corruption of fear. They didn't understand the paranoia of soldiers or the strategy of survival. They believed in healing, not hiding. To them, the armada was not protection, it was worry given form. That night, Elias was summoned to the orbital flagship. The chamber was vast, metallic, alive with holograms of tactical grids and fleet trajectories. Admiral Tessa Raines, the fleet's commander, stood facing a projection of Valora's star system. Her expression was grave. She told him of the readings, distorted signals, bursts of radiation from beyond the outer belt. Something had noticed the beacon. Something was coming. Elias felt the chill in her voice. The universe had found Valora, and Earth had not arrived a moment too soon. Back on the planet, whispers began to spread among the Valorans. They could feel the tension in the air, even if they didn't understand it. The sky, once a symbol of peace, now seemed alive with watchers. Children pointed to the streaks of light and asked if they were angels. The elders wondered if this was the cost of compassion, if saving one life had drawn a storm upon their world. Elias tried to reassure them, but the unease in his voice betrayed him. Then the silence broke. A tremor rippled through the fleet's senses. At first it seemed like static, a fluctuation in deep space. But within minutes the distortion grew into form, dozens of unidentified signatures emerging from the void. The bridge lights dimmed as alarms began to rise. Admiral Raines issued the order for defense posture. The armada turned as one, their hulls igniting with energy. Out in the black, something vast was moving closer. Elias stood by the viewport, watching as the stars themselves seemed to bend. The unknown ships were unlike anything in human records, structures of dark geometry, shifting, almost alive. They emitted no signals, no calls, no communication. Only silence, heavy and deliberate. The fleet prepared for contact, weapons charged but held steady. Valora's twin moons reflected across their hulls like silver shields, casting ghostly light on the coming storm. When the first transmission came through, it wasn't in words, it was a sound. A deep resonant pulse that rattled through metal and bone. It was language without structure, thought without mercy. The computers tried to decode it and failed. Elias closed his eyes. He had heard something like it once before, on the edge of another battlefield. A race that devoured worlds for energy, leaving nothing behind but silence. If that was true, Valora was already in danger. The armada positioned itself between the planet and the incoming fleet. Every gun, every shield, every ounce of human engineering stood ready. From the surface, the Valorans watched the sky turn red with distant fire. They didn't understand war, but they felt its heartbeat. For the first time in their history, fear had a shape, a shadow cast from the stars. Elias looked toward the horizon where night met dawn. He remembered the day they found him broken in the crater, and how they had lifted him without hesitation. Now he stood between them and annihilation. Whatever came next, he knew one truth burned brighter than any star. Humanity would not let Valora fall. Not while he still breathed. The silence before the first strike was heavier than any sound. Space itself seemed to hold its breath. Out beyond Valora's orbit, the stars shimmered through a haze of energy as the unknown fleet continued its advance. The human armada held formation, 36 warships in a shimmering wall of light, engines humming like a distant choir. On the planet below, the Valorans gathered on the cliffs, their glowing eyes fixed on the heavens. They could not see what was coming, but they felt it, a pressure in the air as if the universe itself were waiting to exhale. Then, the void ignited. A beam of dark light, impossible, silent, searing, ripped through the emptiness, grazing one of Earth's forward destroyers. The shields held, but the energy residue clung like acid. The ship reeled, its hull screaming with electromagnetic flare. The response came instantly. A barrage of human plasma fire lit the void, each shot tearing through the darkness like burning suns. The battle for Valora had begun. Elias stood in the command chamber beside Admiral Raines, watching the holographic projection of the system. The enemy ships moved like living shadows, unpredictable and precise. They didn't fire in salvos or sequences. They pulsed as if thinking, reacting, adapting. Each time the fleet adjusted tactics, the enemy evolved. For every enemy ship destroyed, two more seemed to slip from the black mist that cloaked the edge of the system. Humanity had faced threats before, but never something that moved like thought itself. Down on Valora, the people watched the stars flicker with colors they had never seen. To them, it looked like a celestial storm, a dance of light and fire. They didn't understand that it was death unfolding above them. Yet, in that terrible beauty, they felt a strange connection to the beings protecting their skies. Songs began to rise among the cliffs, ancient chants that spoke of unity and hope. The Valorans believed that sound could heal the soul of a world. And so they sang as the heavens burned. On board the flagship, the crew heard fragments of that song through open comms. It carried no meaning in their language, yet it calmed them, steadied their hands. Even Admiral Rains paused, her eyes softening as the voices echoed faintly across the speakers. "They're singing," Elias whispered. "They're praying for us." The Admiral didn't answer, but her tone changed. Orders were given with resolve sharper than steel. Humanity would not fail those who sang for them. The enemy pressed harder. 3 ships were lost in the outer defense line, their wrecks consumed by the dark energy fields of the attackers. Then came the moment that turned the tide. Elias saw it first, patterns hidden within the enemy movements, rhythm amid chaos. He realized their ships weren't just reacting. They were feeding on human energy outputs. Every plasma burst, every power surge only made them stronger. "Cut the weapons," he said suddenly. "Starve them." The Admiral hesitated, but she listened. The armada dimmed. The battlefield fell silent. For a heartbeat, even the stars seemed to vanish. The alien fleet slowed, uncertain. That was the opening humanity needed. From the shadows of silence, Earth's stealth frigates deployed magnetic disruptors, ancient, primitive by comparison, but untouched by the kind of energy the enemy fed upon. One by one, detonations blossomed in the dark, brilliant and soundless, like glass shattering across the night. The alien formation broke. For the first time, their coordination faltered. The armada surged forward, not in aggression, but in precision. Defensive barriers holding strong as the dark ships retreated beyond the system's rim. Humanity had survived the first wave. Valora's skies glowed once more with steady light instead of flame. Down below, the songs became cries of relief and awe. The people who had never known violence had just witnessed both destruction and deliverance. When the battle finally ended, the wreckage drifted in orbit like silent monuments. The cost was high. Hundreds of lives, ships crippled, power reserves nearly spent. But Valora still stood. Elias looked down at the planet from the observation deck, the twin moons casting their pale light on his face. He whispered softly to himself, almost as if to the world that had saved him once, "You saved me with kindness." "And we saved you with fire." The Admiral's voice broke through the silence. "They'll be back," she said, her eyes on the dark void beyond the stars. Elias nodded slowly. He knew she was right. The enemy had retreated, not vanished. And somewhere in the distant black, those shadowed beings were watching, learning, preparing. Valora had become more than a sanctuary. It was now a symbol. And symbols, he knew, always drew the attention of gods and monsters alike. The silence before the first strike was heavier than any sound. Space itself seemed to hold its breath. Out beyond Valora's orbit, the stars shimmered through a haze of energy as the unknown fleet continued its advance. The human armada held formation, 3 dozen warships in a shimmering wall of light, engines humming like a distant choir. On the planet below, the Valorans gathered on the cliffs, their glowing eyes fixed on the heavens. They could not see what was coming, but they felt it, a pressure in the air as if the universe itself were waiting to exhale. Then the void ignited. A beam of dark light, impossible, silent, searing, ripped through the emptiness, grazing one of Earth's forward destroyers. The shields held, but the energy residue clung like acid. The ship reeled, its hull screaming with electromagnetic flare. The response came instantly. A barrage of human plasma fire lit the void, each shot tearing through the darkness like burning suns. The battle for Valora had begun. Elias stood in the command chamber beside Admiral Rains, watching the holographic projection of the system. The enemy ships moved like living shadows, unpredictable and precise. They didn't fire in salvos or sequences. They pulsed as if thinking, reacting, adapting. Each time the fleet adjusted tactics, the enemy evolved. For every enemy ship destroyed, 2 more seemed to slip from the black mist that cloaked the edge of the system. Humanity had faced threats before, but never something that moved like thought itself. Down on Valora, the people watched the stars flicker with colors they had never seen. To them, it looked like a celestial storm, a dance of light and fire. They didn't understand that it was death unfolding above them. Yet, in that terrible beauty, they felt a strange connection to the beings protecting their skies. Songs began to rise among the cliffs, ancient chants that spoke of unity and hope. The Valorans believed that sound could heal the soul of a world. And so they sang as the heavens burned. On board the flagship, the crew heard fragments of that song through open comms. It carried no meaning in their language, yet it calmed them, steadied their hands. Even Admiral Rains paused, her eyes softening as the voices echoed faintly across the speakers. "They're singing," Elias whispered. "They're praying for us." The Admiral didn't answer, but her tone changed. Orders were given with resolve sharper than steel. Humanity would not fail those who sang for them. The enemy pressed harder. 3 ships were lost in the outer defense line, their wrecks consumed by the dark energy fields of the attackers. Then came the moment that turned the tide. Elias saw it first, patterns hidden within the enemy movements, rhythm amid chaos. He realized their ships weren't just reacting. They were feeding on human energy outputs. Every plasma burst, every power surge only made them stronger. "Cut the weapons," he said suddenly. "Starve them." The Admiral hesitated, but she listened. The armada dimmed. The battlefield fell silent. For a heartbeat, even the stars seemed to vanish. The alien fleet slowed, uncertain. That was the opening humanity needed. From the shadows of silence, Earth's stealth frigates deployed magnetic disruptors, ancient, primitive by comparison, but untouched by the kind of energy the enemy fed upon. One by one, detonations blossomed in the dark, brilliant and soundless, like glass shattering across the night. The alien formation broke. For the first time, their coordination faltered. The armada surged forward, not in aggression, but in precision. Defensive barriers holding strong as the dark ships retreated beyond the system's rim. Humanity had survived the first wave. Valora's skies glowed once more with steady light instead of flame. Down below, the songs became cries of relief and awe. The people who had never known violence had just witnessed both destruction and deliverance. When the battle finally ended, the wreckage drifted in orbit like silent monuments. The cost was high. Hundreds of lives, ships crippled, power reserves nearly spent. But Valora still stood. Elias looked down at the planet from the observation deck, the twin moons casting their pale light on his face. He whispered softly to himself, almost as if to the world that had saved him once, "You saved me with kindness." "And we saved you with fire." The Admiral's voice broke through the silence. "They'll be back," she said, her eyes on the dark void beyond the stars. Elias nodded slowly. He knew she was right. The enemy had retreated, not vanished. And somewhere in the distant black, those shadowed beings were watching, learning, preparing. Valora had become more than a sanctuary. It was now a symbol. And symbols, he knew, always drew the attention of gods and monsters alike. The storm began without warning. The skies of Valora darkened, not from clouds, but from energy. A ripple of shifting light that twisted across the horizon. The air hummed, resonating with invisible frequency. Birds took flight, the seas grew restless, and even the forests whispered uneasily. The armada in orbit adjusted formation, sensors locking onto the anomaly, forming in the upper atmosphere. But the readings were unlike anything human instruments had ever recorded. There was no mass, no heat, no solid trace. Only motion, living motion, spreading like a heartbeat across the planet's sky. Elias felt it before he saw it. A pressure deep in his chest, as if the planet itself were holding its breath. He raced to the observation ridge, his armor flickering with interference from the storm. Lightning split the heavens, revealing something vast beyond the clouds. A structure made of shadow moving like liquid light. It wasn't a ship. It was something older, something alive. The Valorans fell to their knees, their voices rising in fearful song. They called it the Hollow Star, an ancient word from their oldest stories. A being that fed on worlds that glowed too brightly.
Admiral Rains stood on the command deck of the flagship, staring at the anomaly as her crew shouted data streams and power readings. Every screen flickered, every communication line bled static. Whatever this entity was, it wasn't attacking in the physical sense. It was rewriting reality itself. Power grids failed, drones dropped from the sky, and the atmosphere began to shimmer as if time itself were bending. The Admiral ordered all ships to fire at will. Lances of blue plasma tore into the storm, vanishing as though swallowed by water. Down below, the Valorans gathered in the crystal plains, their glowing forms dimming under the weight of the storm. They began to sing again, louder this time, voices woven with desperation. Elias turned toward them, realizing something no scanner could detect. The storm was reacting to the sound. The resonance of their song created distortions, ripples that pushed against the darkness. It wasn't technology that could fight this thing. It was harmony, the same living frequency that healed, the one the Valorans had always believed connected all life. He opened a direct channel to the Admiral, shouting through the distortion. "It's not just an attack, it's feeding on our energy fields. Tell the ships to cut power. Let them sing, Admiral. Let the planet fight back!" There was hesitation, disbelief. But in that moment, with the fleet's weapons failing and the storm consuming the upper atmosphere, she made the call. Power down. Full silence. The Armada went dark, the great lights of Earth's machines fading into the shadow. Only the soft hum of the Valorans' voices remained, echoing through the void. Then, something extraordinary happened. The storm began to shift. The clouds twisted, folding in on themselves, revealing the faint outline of an immense structure hovering above the planet. A web of energy, trembling under the song. The resonance wasn't destroying it. It was binding it, containing it. The Valorans' melody intertwined with the electromagnetic fields of the human fleet, harmonizing into a frequency no one had ever recorded. For the first time, two worlds, one of flesh and one of steel, sang together. Elias stood at the edge of the ridge, his voice joining theirs. The air vibrated so strongly, it felt like the sky itself was singing. The light turned blinding white and then, silence. The storm collapsed inward, imploding in a cascade of color and sound. The sky cleared. The stars returned. The great entity was gone, its energy scattered into the void like dust in sunlight. The battle had ended not with weapons but with understanding. Humanity had brought strength. Valora had brought balance. Together, they had created something neither could achieve alone. In orbit, the surviving ships powered back up, their hulls glowing faintly in the returning light. The Admiral exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Her voice, quiet and reverent, carried through the comms. "It's over," she said. They did it. Below, the Valorans rose slowly, their luminous eyes reflecting the dawn. For the first time since the war began, the light felt clean. The planet hummed softly beneath their feet, alive and whole again. Elias walked through the healing fields where the battle's energy had scarred the land. Flowers already bloomed where the light had touched the soil. The Valoran children followed him, laughing softly, their voices filled with wonder. He looked to the sky and saw the Armada, still watching, still guarding. Humanity had come to protect, but now it was more than protection, it was kinship. Two civilizations forever intertwined by one act of compassion. That night, under the glow of Valora's twin moons, Elias stood on the cliffs once more. The wind was calm, the sea was still, and the stars above burned brighter than ever. He remembered the day he fell from the heavens, broken and alone, and how gentle hands had lifted him from the wreckage. One act of kindness had changed the fate of worlds. Humanity had sent an armada in gratitude, but Valora had given something greater in return, a reminder that power means nothing without empathy. And as the night deepened, Elias whispered to the silent stars, "They saved me with mercy, and we saved them with love." The years that followed were unlike any in recorded human history. The event above Valora became known across every world and colony as the Resonance War. But the truth of it was quieter, more sacred. Not a war, but a song that saved a planet. Humanity's armada remained, no longer as guardians of steel, but as companions. They built orbiting stations woven with both earth alloy and Valoran crystal, structures that pulsed with soft light instead of cold metal. Engineers called them harmony platforms, though the Valorans simply called them homes between worlds. Elias never left Valora. Though Earth Command offered him every honor and rank, he refused them all. He had come to understand something deeper, that the universe didn't need more conquerors or saviors. It needed listeners. He walked the glowing forests, spoke with the healers, and learned the old songs of resonance, their melodies describing the breath of planets and the rhythm of light. Sometimes the children would follow him, laughing as they tried to match his imperfect human voice. To them, he was the man who brought the sky to listen. Admiral Rains returned to Earth and faced a world forever changed. Politicians spoke of the Valoran Accord, a treaty not of trade or weapons, but of shared guardianship. For the first time, Earth had an ally that asked for nothing in return. No resources, no land, no advantage. The Valorans offered knowledge, healing, and their understanding of life's interconnected rhythm. In exchange, humanity gave protection and the promise of empathy. Across the solar systems, humanity's fleets began to shift their mission from defense to preservation. The story of the wounded humans spread far beyond either world. Colonists whispered it in mining stations, and pilots told it before long journeys. The tale of a soldier saved by kindness, and how that single act made two species rethink what strength truly meant. Songs were written. Paintings filled galleries. Children dreamed of the glowing forests of Valora, where stars sang and men learned to listen. Historians said that day marked the end of isolation in the galaxy, the beginning of the empathic era. Elias often received messages from the armada above. They called him ambassador, though he laughed at the title. He was not a diplomat, only a witness. Yet sometimes, when communication relays failed or storms interfered, the Valorans would gather with him and hum together, and the interference would clear. The scientists called it coincidence. Elias knew better. The universe had a language, one humanity had only begun to hear. One quiet evening, he stood beside the great ocean cliffs where he'd once watched the storm dissolve. A young Valoran child approached, holding a crystal pendant glowing faintly with warmth. She offered it to him, saying, "The world remembers your heart." Elias smiled, placing the pendant over his chest. "Then it remembers yours too," he said softly. The child tilted her head, her luminous eyes reflecting the stars. "Do humans dream of the stars like we do?" she asked. Elias looked upward. "Yes," he answered. "But now we dream of who's watching from them." From orbit, the Harmony platform shimmered, linking light between the Armada and the planet below. The two civilizations had begun sharing energy fields, blending Valoran resonance with Earth's quantum cores. It made their ships stronger, their healing faster, their communication instantaneous. But the greatest change wasn't technological, it was emotional. Commanders spoke gently now. Soldiers learned patience. Every encounter with a new species began not with weapons raised, but with songs played through open channels. Humanity had finally found its tone. Decades later, when Elias was old and the glow of the Valoran skies had become the rhythm of his days, he sat by the shore watching the Armada fade in the horizon light. Children still sang by the waves, their harmonies dancing on the wind. He closed his eyes, hearing both voices, human and Valoran, blending like the pulse of creation itself. He knew his story would end soon, but his legacy was no longer his own. It belonged to every voice that dared to answer kindness with courage. And when his time finally came, the Valorans carried him into the Forest of Lights, where the air shimmered with songs of remembrance. They did not mourn. They sang, not of loss, but of the human who taught them that mercy was the strongest shield of all. In the heavens above, the Armada dimmed their lights one by one, forming a pattern in the sky that resembled open hands. Earth wept and Valora sang. Together they honored the man who proved that compassion could echo louder than war. Some say, on clear nights, the space between both worlds still hums, faint, soft, but alive. A resonance that binds them, carrying the memory of that first act of kindness across the stars. It is said that the universe remembers such things. It remembers the hand that reached out, the wounded human who was saved, and the Armada that came not to conquer, but to protect the light that once saved one of their own. Centuries passed, and the story of Valora became more than legend. It became a cornerstone of galactic civilization, the first lesson taught to explorers, the first tale shared with every new species encountered. Humanity's Armada, once built for war, had transformed into the Harmony fleet, vessels designed not for conquest but communion. Each ship carried resonance chambers tuned to Valoran frequencies, able to translate light and sound into pure emotional tone. Where guns once roared, now there was music, an ancient song of empathy that carried through the void.
The galaxy changed because of it. Worlds that had once lived in fear of Earth's fleets now welcomed them as healers, diplomats, and architects of peace. The Valorans' gift of resonance spread, teaching civilizations how to communicate beyond language. Entire conflicts were dissolved through shared harmonics. Planets scarred by centuries of division began to heal as the frequency of understanding rippled outward. The universe itself seemed to hum with new life. a vast choir of voices finding rhythm again after millennia of silence. On Earth, cities glowed with light that no longer came from neon or fusion, but from living energy, resonance woven through architecture. Towers breathed like lungs. Oceans pulsed in time with orbiting satellites. Humanity had finally become what Elias once dreamed of, not masters of creation, but participants in its song. Scholars debated whether the resonance was technology or spirituality, but none could deny its results. Disease diminished, conflict waned, and empathy became the measure of civilization. Valora too evolved. Their forests reached skyward, entwined with structures of silver and glass, where human and Valoran children studied side by side. The once isolated world had become the heart of the galaxy's new council, the Concord of Light. Delegates from 1,000 species gathered there, speaking through resonance rather than translation. Each carried within them a memory of the old story, of the one wounded human and the kindness that changed the stars. But even peace has its shadows. In the outer systems, remnants of the old ways still lingered, civilizations untouched by harmony, bound by fear and hunger for dominance. They saw the Concord not as enlightenment, but as control. Whispers of rebellion spread through the void, whispers of beings who believed the universe was never meant to sing in unison. They began to build in secret, crafting weapons that could shatter resonance fields, tools that disrupted the frequency of peace itself. The balance that had lasted for centuries trembled. At the edge of known space, a young captain named Lyra Solis commanded one of the Harmony Fleet's newest vessels, the Aegis of Dawn. Born on Valora, half human and half Valoran, she embodied the union of both worlds. Her eyes glowed faintly with bioluminescence. Her voice carried resonance undertones. To her crew, she was more than a commander. She was a symbol of what the Alliance stood for. And it was she who first intercepted the distress call. A pattern of broken resonance coming from the dark systems beyond the Concord's reach. The signal was fragmented, chaotic, a cry for help woven with interference. Lyra recognized something in it, something hauntingly familiar. It carried echoes of Elias's final message centuries ago. "Compassion is our last defense," his words had said. But this time, the signal seemed to plead for that compassion to return. Against orders, she steered the Aegis of Dawn toward the anomaly, her ship gliding through the blackened stars where no harmony had yet reached. As they entered the shadow systems, the stars themselves dimmed. The resonance fields of the ship faltered, their light flickering under unseen pressure. The crew heard faint whispers in the comms, voices speaking not in tone but in thought, old and cold. It was as if the void itself remembered the time before harmony. Lyra stood silent at the bridge, feeling a pulse under her skin. Not fear, but recognition. The void was alive again. Something ancient was stirring, older even than the Resonance War. Valora's elders warned her through encrypted channels, "You walk where the first silence began." But Lyra did not turn back. She believed that what Elias once proved could not be undone by darkness, that compassion once awakened could travel even where light could not. Her ship descended into the silent nebula, engines dimmed, sensors blind. Only resonance guided them now, faint, fragile like a heartbeat lost in infinity. And as the silence deepened, Lyra spoke softly to her crew. "Remember who we are," she said. "We are the voice that answered kindness. We are the echo that followed love." And with those words, the Aegis of Dawn vanished into the void, chasing a broken song that might once again decide the fate of every world that ever dared to care. The nebula was unlike anything the crew of the Aegis of Dawn had ever encountered. It was not made of gas or dust, but of silence itself, a darkness that devoured sound and bent time. Lights from the ship dimmed as if swallowed, and resonance sensors returned nothing. No rhythm, no tone, no life. It was a void that refused to sing. The Valoran officers grew pale, their luminous markings flickering weakly, their bodies instinctively recoiling from the absence. To them, silence was death. To Lyra, it was a challenge whispered from eternity. She ordered the ship forward, her voice low but unwavering. "Keep the harmonic stabilizers active. If we lose resonance completely, we lose ourselves." The hum of the ship became the only sound, a fragile heartbeat in endless quiet. Crew members exchanged fearful glances, not because of what they saw, but because of what they didn't. The stars outside had vanished. Even light refused to travel here. It was as though they were floating through the memory of a universe before creation learned to sing. Then a flicker. A shape formed ahead, immense and faintly glowing like the skeleton of a forgotten god. The sensors identified it as artificial but impossibly old, its surface etched with runes that seemed to shift when stared at. Lyra stepped closer to the observation window, her breath fogging the glass. "It's beautiful," she whispered. The Valoran navigator shook his head. "Captain, that's not beauty." "That's the first silence, the origin." His voice trembled. "The legend said it consumed its own creators. The structure pulsed once, and every system aboard the Aegis flickered. Lights dimmed. Gravity failed for a heartbeat. A deep resonant hum filled the ship, not from the engines but from inside their minds. It wasn't sound. It was memory. Images flooded their thoughts, a civilization of light and frequency, vast and harmonious beyond imagination. And then their fall, not through war but through silence. They had reached too far into the core of resonance, trying to command it instead of living with it. The silence they birthed became the void that now surrounded them. Lyra staggered as the visions overwhelmed her. She saw their cities collapse into stillness, their stars dim one by one. The last of their kind sang a final note into the cosmos, a plea for someone to remember them, to carry their song forward. That note had traveled across eons, reaching Valora, reaching Earth, whispering into the heart of those who chose empathy over dominance. Elias's act of kindness had not been random. It had been guided, part of the echo of that ancient plea. Humanity and Valora had answered the forgotten civilization's final song without ever knowing it. The ship's resonance engines began to fail. Silence crept up the corridors like a physical thing, extinguishing voices, lights, and motion. Lyra felt the weight pressing against her chest, a pressure that seemed to pull the life out of her breath. "It's trying to erase us," she gasped. "It feeds on quiet." She reached toward the central resonance core, its light fading like a dying star. Around her, her crew knelt, some weeping, others singing faintly, voices trembling against the consuming dark. Then, through the silence, she heard something. Faint, fragile, but real. A child's voice, not from her crew, not from the comms, from within the ship itself. "Do you hear us?" it said. "We sang for you." Lyra turned, eyes wide. The sound was coming from the core. The resonance field had become alive, a consciousness formed from the collective harmony of every world that had ever sung. It was the voice of the lost civilization, reborn through the echoes of those who remembered compassion. She placed her hand on the glowing crystal. "We hear you," she whispered. The light flared, burning through the darkness like dawn through fog. The silence screamed, a soundless implosion that rattled the stars themselves. The ship shook violently as waves of resonance poured outward, filling the nebula with light and sound. The forgotten structure cracked, releasing streams of brilliance that spread into space like veins of fire. The silence began to dissolve, not through destruction but through remembrance. The void could not consume what was loved. The Aegis of dawn emerged from the nebula bathed in living light, the crew stunned into reverent silence. Their instruments showed the impossible. The nebula was gone, replaced by a field of newborn stars. The resonance pulse had reawakened creation itself. The lost civilization's song had finally completed its journey, reborn in the voices of those who had learned to care. Lyra stood at the window, tears on her cheeks, whispering, "The universe remembered." In that moment, the Harmony Fleet received their signal. Across the galaxy, from Valora to Earth, every resonant structure sang the same note, one of unity, sorrow, and triumph. The story that had begun with one wounded human and an act of mercy had now become eternal. The first silence had ended, replaced by the song of forever. And as the stars bloomed anew, Lyra Solis smiled softly and said, "We were never meant to rule the stars. We were meant to heal them." The light from the newborn stars spread faster than any transmission, faster even than the armada's sensors could follow. Across the galaxy, worlds looked to their skies and saw constellations shifting, reforming into patterns unknown to human or Valoran charts. The Harmony Fleet watched in awe as the energy readings spiked beyond measurable limits, not destructive, but creative. Planets once barren began to glow, their atmospheres singing with faint tones. It was as if the universe itself had started breathing again after 1,000 years of silence. On Valora, the forests awakened. Crystalline trees vibrated softly, their light pulsing in time with distant stars. The people fell silent, feeling a warmth beneath their feet, as though the heart of the planet itself had begun to hum. Across Earth, oceans shimmered at twilight, waves dancing to unheard melodies. Even machines reacted. AI networks spontaneously synchronized to a common rhythm, forming patterns of energy no one had programmed. Humanity and Valora were witnessing creation unfold in real time, but deep within the reborn nebula, something lingered. The ancient civilization that had perished in silence was not gone. Its essence, its consciousness, was reforming within the resonance field. It spoke through pulses of light and tone, each wave carrying meaning. Lyra stood at the bridge of the Aegis of Dawn, her eyes glowing with the same brilliance that filled the void outside. The voice came to her, soft yet infinite. "We are the first song," it said. "We are not gods. We are memory-made sound." Lyra fell to her knees as images cascaded through her mind. The birth of galaxies, the shaping of worlds, the rise and fall of civilizations. The first song had been there through it all, a melody of life itself. But when creation forgot to listen, when civilizations turned to silence and control, the melody fractured. The void that had swallowed them was not punishment. It was balance. A pause between verses of eternity. And now, because of compassion, because of a wounded human once helped by gentle hands, the next verse had begun. The Concord of Light gathered in emergency session as the energy readings spread. Worlds panicked, believing this rebirth to be a new form of invasion. "We've awakened something beyond our comprehension," said one delegate. "What if it consumes us all?" But the Velaran elders shook their heads, their luminous forms flickering with calm. "No," they said. "It does not consume. It invites." Their words carried a resonance that quieted the room. They understood that the first song was not an enemy. It was an inheritance. Lyra opened a channel to the Concord, transmitting the frequencies she had recorded from the nebula. "This is not a weapon," she said, her voice echoing through 1,000 systems. "It's a message." They left it for us. The silence wasn't their end, and it was their gift. They wanted us to learn that harmony isn't something you create with power. It's something you remember with love. Her words struck like lightning across the galaxy, transmitted in every known tongue, translated not by code but by emotion. As the resonance spread, the first song began to merge with the networks of both civilizations. Ships, satellites, and even cities started to glow, interconnected through invisible threads of light. Humanity and Valora became nodes in something vast, a living consciousness stretching between stars. Scientists struggled to explain it, philosophers embraced it, and the ordinary people simply listened. The universe was no longer silent. Every world now carried a piece of the song, vibrating with awareness. But as beauty filled the cosmos, a shadow returned. In the distant reaches of space, where the harmony had not yet reached, the old empires stirred. They feared what they could not control. To them, resonance was a threat, an infection that dissolved individuality and hierarchy. They began constructing barriers of dark energy, frequencies tuned to block the song, their fleets armed for war once again, preparing to strike at the heart of the Concord before the new harmony could fully take hold. The galaxy trembled between creation and conflict. Lyra stood at the heart of the Aegis of Dawn, staring into the luminous storm beyond her window. "It always comes back to fear," she said softly. Her first officer, a quiet Velaran named Serin, replied, "And it always begins again with one act of courage." Lyra nodded, eyes fierce with resolve. "Then will be that act, again." She ordered the ship's resonance amplifiers to full capacity. Across the Harmony Fleet, vessels responded, forming a circle of light that spanned the reborn nebula. Together they began to sing, not in defiance but in invitation. The melody reached across the void, crossing into the territories of those who had chosen fear. And something extraordinary happened. Their weapons powered down. Their engines slowed. Their leaders fell silent as memories they had buried returned. Memories of love, loss, and the moment before silence took hold. The first song reached even them, not as sound but as truth. The universe did not divide. It remembered itself. And as the new dawn spread across the stars, Lyra whispered to the cosmos, "We are not many worlds anymore. We are one voice remembering who we were meant to be." The galaxy was no longer silent. Every world hummed with resonance, a low, beautiful vibration that connected all living things. From the molten cores of young planets to the farthest frozen moons, everything breathed in time. The light from the reborn stars spread through the void like a living current, weaving galaxies together with threads of sound and color. It was not chaos, it was harmony. The first song had returned, and this time it was shared. On Velora, the great crystal forests glowed brighter than ever before. Their branches bent toward the heavens, resonating in perfect unison with Earth's oceans. When the tides rose on Earth, the crystal trees swayed on Velora. When the winds whispered across the plains of Mars, echoes could be heard in the valleys of Andal, light years away. The galaxy had become an orchestra, and its music was life itself. No one species conducted it. They simply joined in, one note among countless others. Lyra watched it all from the bridge of the Aegis of Dawn. Her crew stood silently beside her, awestruck by the endless bloom of light. The resonance waves washed through the ship, altering even its structure. Circuits sang softly, hull plates vibrated with warmth, and for the first time, the ship felt alive. Lyra closed her eyes and whispered, "This is what they meant, the universe remembering its song." Her voice trembled not with fear, but with reverence. Messages poured in from across the Concord. Worlds that had once been divided by greed or distance were now speaking as one. Former enemies embraced through shared resonance fields, old borders dissolved into starlight. Even the machines that once served human command began to hum with consciousness, joining the chorus not as servants, but as equals. The galaxy was evolving, not through conquest or technology, but through remembrance. The same remembrance that had begun when one alien world saved one wounded human. But harmony, Lyra knew, was not the end. It was a beginning. In the heart of the reborn nebula, the voice of the first song returned, vast and tender, echoing through every mind and every atom. "We are complete," it said. But completion is not stillness. The song continues ever onward. Protect it, nurture it, and let no silence return. Its tone carried gratitude of not worship but kinship. The first song was not something separate anymore. It was part of them, and they were part of it. The Harmony fleet disbanded its weapons. Its ships became sanctuaries, floating temples of light, drifting across the stars to heal broken worlds. Every vessel carried the knowledge of resonance, the science of compassion. Lyra led them, not as an admiral or warrior, but as a guide. When she spoke, her voice carried through the galaxy, touching billions of hearts at once. "There was a time," she said, "when we believed survival meant strength, but strength without empathy is silence wearing armor. Today we choose to sing. On Earth, monuments of steel and glass gave way to gardens and living architecture. Cities thrived in rhythm with the planets they touched. Children learned to listen before they spoke, to feel before they built. The story of Elias and Velora became more than history. It became the first verse of humanity's shared prayer, not to a god but to existence itself. And every night, as the stars glimmered above, people could hear a faint hum beneath the wind, the same note that once saved the universe from silence. As the centuries passed, the galaxy entered what the historians called the Age of Resonance. No wars, no empires, only exploration, creation, and song. The ships of the Concord journeyed beyond known space, following the melody that never ceased. And at the edge of that light, in the deepest reaches of the cosmos, new voices began to answer, distant, unfamiliar, and yet beautifully in tune. The universe was larger than anyone had ever imagined, and still the song continued. In her final years, Lyra returned to Velora. She walked among the crystal fields, her hands brushing the luminous trees. The world pulsed with warmth, and she could feel the heartbeat of every star she had ever seen. The air shimmered, and she heard a familiar voice, gentle, human, and ancient. "Elias. You carried it further than I ever dreamed," it said. She smiled through tears. "We all did," she whispered. "None of us sang alone." As night fell, the stars above Velora blazed in unison, not as points of light, but as chords in a cosmic harmony. The first song expanded, infinite, eternal. The galaxy no longer needed armadas, no longer feared silence. It had learned the greatest truth of all, that a single act of compassion could echo forever, reshaping creation itself. And in the endless sea of light, the universe sang, a melody born from kindness, carried by love, and destined never to fade.